Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. Thanks for having us here today. Give you kind of a
Really quick, Mark, for the record, you're Mark Zurski.
Yep. Mark Zurski, Superintendent for Pioneer
Thank
Irrigation
you.
District.
Thanks.
Kind of paint a picture of where our district is located. We deliver water from Canada Road all the way west to Greenleaf, and then to the north from the Boise River all the way south to about Lone Star Road in Nampa. And we're bordered by Nampa Meridian Irrigation District, Boise Project, Wilder District, Settlers Irrigation District on the east. We deliver water to other irrigation districts, Franklin Ditch Company, Mason Ditch Company, Canyon Hill Irrigation District, the cities of Nampa and Caldwell. As we've experienced growth, an alarming amount of growth, to take you back into my tenure, I've been at the district since '92. I was a ditch rider for 12 years. At the time that I was a ditch rider, we averaged about 80 hours overtime a season. That was above and beyond our 40-hour week. Last year, on average, our ditch riders were between 400 and 500 hours of overtime for the irrigation season. What the impacts look like to us, it's the time that it takes to manage the system now. It's the time it takes to travel through the district. The maintenance, on the maintenance side, is taking equipment out, bringing the truck back to the shop because you can no longer leave it alongside the roads. The shoulders are smaller, too much traffic. So we're returning trucks to the shop, going back out to pick things up. And we're just having to handle equipment more and more and more because there's less room to leave it. There's more traffic. There's more harm to be involved in. Over my tenure of nearly 30 years, 29 years, we've created 3 additional positions at Pioneer just to get water to the end of the road, so to speak, from where we were when I started. It just takes more and more and more time to manage the district. Some of the things that we get involved with anymore, I spend a great deal of time dealing with trespass. It's pedestrians on the ditch bank, bicycles on the ditch bank, ATVs on the ditch bank. It's whatever comes along with the development that surrounds us. As everybody thinks that's their public domain. They think of it as a public right of way. So we deal a lot of time dealing with trespass. Dust is becoming a big issue. It never was an issue on the farm, but now it's dust in everybody's backyards. It's dust on everybody's barbecue that evening. So it's slowing our travels down to try to eliminate things like that. We're watering roadways now. We have a water truck. Who would have ever thought we'd be watering our ditch banks, to keep the dust down. The weeds and things like that actually, are problematic to some degree, but, in a lot of ways, they help us keep banks established and keep banks from eroding, and complaints on weeds come in all the time. And on the flip side of that, the growing environmental impacts that we face are making those things harder and harder and harder to deal with. 2,4-D, that used to be a great tool in our arsenal, no longer available to us because of the residential setbacks that are on the labels. So we're just finding ourselves going more mechanical, more time, more effort, and costs just keep going higher and higher. And kind of the last thing I'll talk about, Pioneer Irrigation District has 34,000 acres that we deliver water to. We're probably flipped right now to about 60% residential, about 40% ag. It was vastly different 30 years ago.
Can you say that number again? 46%?
About 40% agriculture and about 60% residential. As the cities grow, the subdivisions come on, they annex lands into the city. So Pioneer, instead of delivering to 10, 15 accounts, will now deliver to one account to a city. We deliver the water to the city delivers to the subdivision. So on the revenue side, the irrigation district's seeing less money as things develop and as lands annex. because of the loss of count fees that we handle. And one of the bigger things, everybody's heard about aging infrastructure. I think Pioneer does a great job as far as maintaining ours. I don't think we're ever where we need to be, but the private infrastructure that delivers to a lot of the towns is aging, and that's forcing a lot of requests for exclusions. Folks can no longer receive water through an age system that they don't maintain, and it's forcing exclusions. So every board meeting we see 2, 3, 4, half dozen sometimes of exclusions that come before the board because they meet the criteria in state law that they can exclude their property because they no longer have access to water. And it's becoming a bigger issue because properties are changing hands now. That new owner is now inheriting that pre-existing problem. But we're seeing a lot of accounts go away because of exclusion. So it's real important to us to figure out how we keep going at a reasonable assessment rate without driving, the farmers out of business. I mean, we're up to $130 an acre for water. It was $60 an acre.
They're really high.
When I started. And we're doing more with less all the time. So it's, that's my big concern. How are we going to keep sustaining the impacts to the district and building less properties as we continue. So with that, thank you. I'll leave some business cards if you have questions afterwards. Feel free to call or email. And
One thing that I said it yesterday, and I've already said it once today, and I'll get to say it again now. When we make land use decisions, we have to base our decisions on the 9 criteria that are found in the zoning ordinance. One of those criteria talks about public services, that they're available, and obviously you can deliver water, but it talks about, and we welcome comments related to the impacts of development on those services. And it's not often enough that I've reviewed those agency letters when I was a planner, and even now reviewing them as a we do not hear from the public agencies enough about the impacts of development and the cost. Schools are a big piece of that. Schools don't provide any comments on those agency response letters that they do get. And then we just keep seeing school bonds being requested because the taxes won't cover the cost of growth for those schools. And so we do have a process, it just doesn't work because people won't respond. And we have to make hard decisions every day, and I know it's hard for you guys to write those letters saying that we can't keep sustaining this growth, and I know that puts you in a political position. And I know I chose that position too, and it is hard. But we have to get to the point where people start responding to those agency letters saying we have constrained impacts and take it seriously, because that's one of the reasons that we consider what is this doing. And when we don't hear from agencies, silence is consent. So that's my grandstanding for that.
Madam Chair, thank you. And I met with Mark when I was campaigning the first time, and he had expressed the same sentiment that there was a critical need for input from the side of the irrigation companies. And with that information, I've tried to ask if they have to tile ditches or, if there's a water delivery impact. We always have a statement in the findings that says they'll have to comply with that. But I see comments. Are you receiving those requests for information, Mark?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Van Beek. Yes, we do receive those,
okay.
and I try to respond to each and every one as far as what our concerns are. One of the issues, just to kind of to add to the conversations, we don't always know exactly what the extent of the project's going to be at the time that it comes through planning and zoning and reaches my desk. We're identifying our facilities, what concerns we may have regarding our facilities, but by the time dirt starts moving, we find ourselves concerned about far more. And the concerns I expressed to Commissioner Van Beek is we're always pushed to the back corner. Everybody wants to get that irrigation stuff out of the way. There for a long time, it was put it under the street, get it out of the way, let's make the best use of all the lands. We're seeing some of the cities now not liking that under the streets, but yeah, we try to address that every opportunity we can. It's very critical for us.
Madam Chair. One of the things that I would be interested in as a commissioner is learning, and it's always my first love. So when we're talking about tiling a lateral, something like that, we had a decision that came before us today. Depending on where that water source falls, if you have tailwater that just empties before that, Mason Creek would be an example, Franklin Ditch, which is what we're a part of. But anytime you tile that, the load of sediment that comes down that fine, even though they put cleanouts in there, I don't know what that looks like or how often they have to clean that to maintain that water delivery. But I think that's a critical part that we could explore more in the discussion process, because it's an amazing amount that comes down that, depending on where you're at in the line and how much flow there is. So really good discussion, good input. If you could continue to work with the board, that would be helpful on sizing. I do try to ask, but again, an expert in that would be awesome.
And Madam Chair, that's one of the elements that's an added element in our budget now, is pipeline inspections. We now have an element in our budget that all we do is we select as many pipelines as we can afford to do that year, and we clean them, we hydro-clean them, have them backed out, because that is the case, and sediment does reach the boxes, and it doesn't always flush out on the end.
So how does the right to farm statement impact you when you get phone calls regarding dust on the canal? Because that actually drives me crazy that you guys have to water those now when they've moved there. And do you ever reference dust is allowed in this zone? You live in an agricultural zone. You're adjacent to an agricultural zone. Dust is expected.
Madam
Chair,
that's really a tough one, because my go-to answer is, you moved here, you should know what you expected to have, kind of thing. And that's, I grew up on a farm. I grew up with the Lucases out in Melba and Dry Lake area and stuff like that. I grew up with farming, and it was everybody just dealt with that stuff. But it's frustrating to have to go out and water ditch banks down, or spread gravel down on ditch banks to try to do stuff to minimize the nuisance that people are complaining about.
But why don't you just let them complain? They moved there. Did anyone tell you that you had to do that? Or are you just doing it because you're nice?
I think the proper response is, how's the most economic way to resolve the issue? Is it spend all my time out dealing with people, or spend a fraction of the money and go ahead and put some gravel down on the ditch bank to try to get rid of the problem? In a lot of ways, it's cheaper to go down and buy a $50 load of gravel and spread it down the ditch bank and be done with it for a couple of years until we have to repeat the process, versus spend hours and hours and hours visiting with neighbors repeatedly about the issue. So sometimes it's easier to try to take care of the issue than it is to keep debating the issue. And I hate that response, but it's kind of what it boils down to. There's only so much I can do in a day's time.
I'd be so tempted to walk. Here's the Idaho right to farm statement. Have a good day.
And no, Madam Chair, I think it highlights the fact that even though we put that statement on the plat, there are implications on that are huge for farmers, whether it's having to wait until you get a clear passage on an application because of the chemical that you're applying, and the no entry zones, all of that. It's not that simple. So I appreciate that. I would support that. But in all practicality, he's right, and then they would probably be open to lawsuits based on whether you're fumigating or whatever you're doing. It's a really tough environment for a farmer out there in one of the most heavily regulated industries in the United States that has to comply more than anybody I know. They are really bound in a way that makes it difficult to farm, and you have coming generations that want to do that, having difficulty finding land, having difficulty raising crops. I'm glad we're here today.